welcome to Gen X Mindscape, the podcast dedicated to exploring the complexities of midlife and the pursuit of a purposeful life. I'm your host, Kyle, here to accompany you on the journey. I'm so glad you tuned into this episode today. I really enjoyed my conversation with Sara Styles and Hannah Martin of the University of Otago in New Zealand. I invited Sara and Hannah on the show because I saw some really interesting research that they had been doing about healthy eating behaviors and people in midlife, and I'm just really glad they said yes. I had never really heard of intuitive eating before, and as I looked into it, it seemed like a healthier way psychologically to approach healthy eating, especially for midlifers. And then I really had a blast talking with Sara and Hannah about it, and as you'll see, they're just a lot of fun, down to earth, and really have some amazing insights to share with us. We start by discussing what intuitive eating is, its core principles, and how it can be beneficial for us in midlife. Then we move into a really interesting discussion about the psychology of eating. We talk about how we can foster intrinsic motivation for healthy eating practices in midlife instead of eating for more extrinsic reasons. We also go deeper into the relationship between mental health, body image, and eating. We talk about how intuitive eating can help us navigate challenges related to cravings, emotional eating, and societal pressures. Finally, we discuss practical tips and resources for those of us seeking to cultivate resilience and sustain healthy eating habits among all of life's demands. It really was a fun, insightful, and down-to-earth conversation. And so let's get to this conversation and introduce our guests. Today, we are delighted to have Dr. Sara Styles on the podcast. Sara is a lecturer in the Department of Human Nutrition at the University of Otago with a really unique background in psychology, behavioral nutrition, and public health. She's really distinguished herself through some innovative work on intuitive eating, a topic that she's passionately explored. She's aiming to bring about positive changes in mental well-being and eating behaviors, especially amongst mid-aged women. We're also lucky enough to have Hannah Martin with us. She's a Ph.D. student under the guidance of Dr. Sara Styles. She's used her role as a community dietitian to share intuitive eating concepts, helping many reshape their relationships with food. She's currently exploring the motivational aspects of intuitive eating in a really interesting way, which you'll hear very soon. Welcome to the show, Hannah and Sara.
Well, thanks for letting us join you.
Yeah, as we've been discussing, I'm thrilled. Sara, could you start out by just giving our listeners some insight into your background and how you got interested in the topics we'll be exploring today?
Yeah, the topic that we're talking about with intuitive eating and acceptance and commitment therapy, there's this academic path that I've been on and a personal path that I've been on. And I'm starting with the personal side. I recall being back in high school when one of the thoughts I had to myself was, I can do everything but lose weight. I was a strong athlete, strong academically, had a job, was involved in extracurriculars. And for me, it was really frustrating that I wasn't small like the other girls. And for me, as a senior in high school, it was on my mind quite a bit because I come from a family of people with larger bodies. We have a strong family history of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And I had a swim coach say, if you lost a few pounds, you might be a little bit faster. And going through all the different unhelpful, maladaptive eating behaviors a teenager does, I found myself later on being in a class for my master's degree in nutrition. And that's when I was introduced to intuitive eating. And for me to learn about an approach where our body has its own wisdom to tell us what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat, and weight is a side effect of that. You can still be healthy and still have a higher than recommended body mass index. I thought was really valuable. And I've been an intuitive eater through lots of different phases of my life. I was in my early 20s when I found out about intuitive eating. And at the time I was getting ready for a wedding and I thought, I'll listen to my body for what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. But actually, it was definitely a learning process at first. I explained to Hannah before that for me, it was kind of a eat when hungry kind of diet. And that's not what intuitive eating is. I let myself eat all the things whenever I wanted to, but I was like eating to the point of satisfaction. I always felt like I wasn't completely satisfied. All the corners of my stomach didn't feel like they were touched with food. And I didn't really love that feeling. But later on, as I got used to listening to my body, like I mentioned, I was an athlete in high school. And even after high school, I got into triathlon and I worked my way up to an Ironman distance. And that is a long event. You spend months and months. For me, it took 4 years to get up to that point.
Wow.
And to prepare for a day that took me 14 hours of swimming 2.4 miles and cycling 112 miles, I think.
Wow.
And then doing a marathon after that. I had to really get in tune with how does my body feel? Am I hydrated? Do I have enough fuel for right now? And do I have enough fuel for 10 minutes from now? And do I have enough fuel for an hour from now? And then later on, I was an intuitive eater through my pregnancy with my son. And that's a really unique time in a woman's life where your body is going through these changes. You have health professionals trying to help you keep yourself healthy, try to keep your baby healthy.
Yes.
And I distinctly remember a day where I was balancing a tub of ice cream on my baby bump and just thinking, like, I want to eat the whole thing, but I have this urge to eat the whole thing, but is that really what I want to do right now?
Right.
So I take a spoonful of ice cream, enjoy it, notice the taste, notice the texture, notice the temperature. And I would just have this message inside me saying, I want another bite of ice cream. And I did keep going and I ate most of the ice cream, but I didn't have that guilt or shame along with it.
Oh,
because
yes.
that was one time in 9 months where I sat there and ate all the ice cream. Yeah. And then the final stage, well, it's not a final stage. I'm still going with it. But
that's right.
The final important part of this story has been the last 4 years with me having chronic fatigue syndrome. So 4 years ago, I got sick with a virus and I'm still recovering from that. And it's affected me cognitively. I have had days where I could not follow a recipe. It would give me a really bad headache and I wouldn't be able to think clearly for hours. I would try to stand up and chop vegetables and stir them in the pot. And I didn't have the physical capacity for doing that. And there were days where a bowl of cereal was all I had energy for, or there was days where scrambled eggs, that was all I had energy for. But with intuitive eating, I was making sure my body was fueled with what my body was capable of doing. So I found that intuitive eating through all these different phases of my life has been really valuable. And over the past it's longer than 10 years now, almost 15 years, I've been researching intuitive eating because I found personally it was really important to me. But what is the evidence for it? And can I contribute to that evidence? And I have been.
Yes. You hit on so many notes there that just, that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you two on this show, because it really is a healthier psychologically way to approach your body, approach food, because in part because of you, Sarah, there's evidence for it. It's becoming more popular, but that's, I think, because there is evidence for it. And let's see, without cussing, holy cow, Sarah, those are some real challenging situations to do intuitive eating that you're discussing. You needed a lot of fuel for the triathlon. You're becoming a mother. And then also with chronic fatigue, those are really challenging situations. So I appreciate so much that you can speak to all of those. So let's dive deeper into that. I have to admit, this is one of my first encounters with intuitive eating, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last. So can we go a little deeper into that in terms of what intuitive eating is and some of the core principles of it?
Absolutely. With intuitive eating, I'll base what I share on the intuitive eating books by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. Those came out maybe about 20 years ago. Hannah can correct me on some of this. And so they're American dietitians, and the book is based on 10 principles. And it's probably simpler not to think of the 10 principles of intuitive eating, but look at how we measure intuitive eating in a research context using Tracy Tilke's intuitive eating scale. Those 10 principles are combined into 4 key components. And One of the components is eating for physical rather than emotional eating. And we have reliance on hunger and satiety cues. So eating based on when that gnawing in your stomach is starting to show up, or when you notice that your concentration is starting to fade, things like that, rather than I'm tired, I'm lonely, I'm bored, I'm sad. Not eating in response to those feelings. We have unconditional permission to eat, which is really tricky for people to think about and actually do. So unconditional permission to eat is allowing yourself to eat what you want, when you want, how much you want. And it's not having rules like I can only eat between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. It's if I'm feeling hungry, I let myself eat. And it is, if I feel like eating a salad, that's what I'm eating. And it's not because a diet is telling me to do that. It's because that's what my body is telling me is going to help me function well as the things like the cakes, the brownies, the pastries. Those are okay because those are pleasurable to eat. And that might be what we need right then and there. Or that it's a social occasion and that's what we're having. So yeah, and letting ourselves eat enough to feel satisfied. Thinking about what works for me in this moment, regardless of what I had earlier in the day. So we're not punishing ourselves if we're feeling hungry now, but thinking, oh, I ate too much earlier. But there is a degree of being practical with intuitive eating. If I know I'm going to have a meeting and I know I'm going to get hungry, it's okay to have a little bit of fuel now so that I don't get hangry during the meeting.
Right.
Yeah. The last component is body food choice congruence. And that is listening to your body and choosing foods that help your body function well. But there's also this gentle nutrition component where you can inform what you eat based on dietary guidelines, but using them flexibly and not using them like rules that you have to follow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's mind-blowing already. And we're only, a few minutes into this. So I really like that. I hear you saying we're kind of like scientists with our body, like what we know works, we keep doing, or, we're tweaking it. We're being reflective about what we're eating and then using that moving forward. That is so cool. This podcast is focused on midlife. And the reason that you got my attention was because you published a really interesting study on using intuitive eating with midlife women. So could you talk a little bit more about how intuitive eating relates to midlife? Hey there, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to express my deep gratitude for listening and for your support. Today, I'm asking for a quick favor that won't cost you anything but would be very valuable to me, and that is, leave me a review. Positive reviews will help other like-minded Gen Xers find the show and join our community. These reviews are also a big encouragement to me to continue to develop the show and create helpful episodes for you. So thanks for sending a review my way, and thanks for being a part of the Gen X Mindscape community.
Yeah, at midlife, we're going through a lot of different things. We might still be having babies or raising children and taking care of parents and balancing a job, and our body is changing. It's not the way it was back in high school. We have a bit more of attention around what is our health going to look like in the future. You might see people more likely to have the doctor say, are you looking like you might have pre-diabetes, for example? Our relationships with our partners might be changing, and we might be thinking about, am I as attractive to my partner as I used to be? Those are the things that come to mind about midlife. Oh, and they're relevant in your 20s and later, but yeah, they've popped up as important issues to our study participants.
For sure. We're going through so many changes, and fueling our bodies for all those responsibilities as we age is really important. So I'm sure there's a big component of like self-compassion and mindfulness. And I'd just like to hear how that kind of fits within your research and what you'd say to our listeners about that.
In order to be able to fuel our body in a way that it wants to be fueled, we have to be able to notice, am I hungry right now? Taking those pauses throughout the day to notice, what am I feeling in my head or in my throat or in my stomach? And being able to label that in a way that works for us, that helps you be able to identify this feeling is hunger rather than this feeling is boredom. That awareness during that snack or during that meal, being aware of the taste, the texture, the food, and how our stomach is feeling, is more of that goes into our stomach to help us notice when would be the last bite threshold, which Evelyn and Elise talk about in their book. And the last bite threshold is when you realize that that could be the last bite of your food that you're going to have for that eating occasion, and paying attention to that.
Definitely. And you really went in depth with some midlife women, and they had some challenges and they had some changes. Could you talk just a little bit about challenges that people might be facing as they try to incorporate intuitive eating, and what you might say to that?
Yeah, a big one, particularly for women who have a long history of dieting. Because keep in mind, with the research that I've done, there have been women who started dieting when they were 9 years old or when they were in their early teens. They have a very long history of restricting what they eat and how much they eat. And so when I am there, or when we're on the website that we created for the intuitive eating intervention, to be told it's okay to eat what you want, it was scary. Yeah. That was a huge challenge, that people felt scared to trust their body, because they thought, if I open up a package of Oreos, I'm going to eat the whole thing. Or if I do open that tub of ice cream, I am going to eat the whole thing. And that's quite scary for people, because they label that as something that's bad if they do that. And what do you do? What do you do if somebody has that fear that they're gonna binge eat? That's a big concern. People, women in particular, worried that they're going to binge eat. And then that's when I would say, well, these are your thoughts that your mind is telling you that you're going to binge eat if you let yourself open up the Oreos. Just be open to seeing what's going to happen. Have that curiosity about what you'll do with the food. And if you do eat the whole sleeve of Oreos, like, do it intentionally, not in a way that you're going to feel guilty or shameful about, but enjoy the fucking Oreos. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but
you are. In fact, I'll probably make a t-shirt of that in a mug and send it to you.
Yeah.
This is an adult show, so bring it on, Sarah.
Yeah, I think just owning up to what you're doing helps people either break that cycle, that diet cycle that they can get into, where somebody's been really restrictive and then they fall off the wagon, have the forbidden food, feel really bad about it for a while, and then get back on the diet cycle. If you just say, this is what's going to work for me right now, is eating this sleeve of Oreos, just going for it. It's okay to be scared of what will happen, especially if you've been dieting for a long time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting doing this podcast, because especially for me as a midlifer, I am reframing my life in terms of, I used to do that, but now I'm wiser and I'm more intentional about my path. And it's not like denying reality. It's about confronting. Yeah, I have done that. That doesn't mean that's how this is going to be moving forward. And I think that's a really cool way to look at that.
It's unlikely that you would keep eating food like that all the time, because your body is going to tell you, actually, eating a bunch of those, whatever it is, we'll stick with the Oreos, might have made me feel really yucky. The next time that I'm having the urge to go and do that, then I've had that past experience, and it's been an opportunity to learn.
That's right.
In the future, maybe I will stop a little bit sooner.
That's right. And that's a big part of it too, is having self-compassion for yourself, and being aware and learning and growing. That's another reason I'm just so excited to share this with people. Hannah, I'm thrilled you're with us here too. You've been taking an interesting angle on it as well. So could you give us a little personal background, and then kind of talk about, your angle you've been putting on this in terms of self-determination theory?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. Like Sarah, I guess when I was younger, going through college, the similar body image issues and maladaptive eating behaviors that a lot of teenage girls in particular go through. And I think that really probably drove my interest in studying nutrition. Probably not the healthiest way to enter the profession, but it's okay. Unfortunately, I think that's why a lot of people do enter it. Studied undergraduate nutrition, then went on to doing my master's of dietetics. And it wasn't until the last 6 months of my master's where I found out about intuitive eating. And so we were essentially given these research topics, and my one was on intuitive eating and self-determination theory. That's when I was introduced to those topics. And it must have been like a month or two into writing my thesis. And I thought, you know what, it would probably be a good idea for me to actually read this book that I keep referring to. I read it and I was like, man, I had such a revelation. The book really resonated with me. And I guess, you know, I had always been interested in the psychology of eating. You know, that's kind of the reason why I had gone into nutrition, because I wanted to figure out why I eat the way I do. And yeah, it was kind of when I read that book that, I don't know, so many things kind of clicked into place. And I thought, oh, I finally get it.
I love it.
It was a little unfortunate that it happened, you know, the last 6 months of my degree, but that's okay.
Right,
I got there in the end. And it was really cool. I went on to working as a dietitian for a wee bit, and particularly as a community dietitian, I was able to introduce people to the concepts of intuitive eating. And just like Sarah was saying before, I did have a lot of midlife people referred to the dietitian service, and many people would often say, like, I don't buy chocolate because I'm scared that I'm just going to eat the whole packet. It was really cool to be able to bring in these ideas of intuitive eating, and now I'm back doing my Ph.D. because I loved intuitive eating so much. I'm looking at intuitive eating from a self-determination theory perspective. So that is a theory of motivation. It's looking at the reasons why people might be wanting to eat intuitively.
Yes. Just curious, which book did you read? I know you've read many books now, but was it the same one Sarah referenced, or what book was it, Hannah?
Yes, the same one Sarah referenced, the intuitive eating book, the one with the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And I think, it was first published in 1995.
Wow.
So there's 4 editions out now, but I think I must have read one of the first editions.
Yeah. Cool. Well, now I'm really interested in this. Now let's go deep on this, Hannah, because like you said, self-determination theory is, I love its perspective. It's kind of focuses on basic psychological needs as it relates to motivation. Tell us a little bit about, the core components of self-determination theory and how it relates to this topic of intuitive eating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, self-determination theory is a theory of motivation. You might think of yourself as having high levels of motivation or low levels of motivation to do something, but self-determination theory also distinguishes between different qualities of motivation. Basically, there's 6 different qualities, but they kind of fall into 2 broad categories of controlled motivation and autonomous motivation. That controlled motivation is where we kind of feel pressure to engage in something. So like we're feeling like we're being controlled to do it. For example, someone may have been told by their doctor, like, you need to try intuitive eating. In this case, that person might feel pressure from their doctor to please them by trying intuitive eating. Or perhaps they would feel guilty if they didn't try to eat this way. So they're kind of feeling that pressure from themselves. That's kind of quite a controlling source of motivation. Autonomous motivation, on the other hand, is where someone engages in a behavior because it kind of reflects their own personal interests and values. For example, someone might see the value in intuitive eating. They can see the benefit of eating foods that make their body feel good, as well as the importance of not depriving themselves. Also, perhaps they actually enjoy finding and cooking new meals that taste good, as well as making their body feel feel good. So those are more what we call more autonomous motivations. So what's really interesting in my research is that you don't have just one of these qualities of motivation. You have a mix of all of these different qualities in different amounts. And we're kind of looking at the mix of that pattern and how it's associated with intuitive eating.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. We don't do things for one reason. And I can guess where this is going because autonomous motivation is more self-sustaining than those extrinsic forces. So can you talk a little bit more about how people might apply that?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why these different qualities of motivation is really important is because, like you say, we know that the autonomous motivations are more self-sustaining. They're associated with healthier outcomes. So like I was talking about, I did my master's research on intuitive eating and self-determination in midlife women. What we found there was the autonomous motivations, they're associated with healthier eating habits. That looks like higher intuitive eating scores, less frequent binge eating of fruits and vegetables. Whereas the controlled motivations, on the other hand, they're the ones where you feel a bit more pressure to engage in a behavior. They're more associated with a higher frequency of binge eating, lower intuitive eating scores, and lower intakes of fruits and vegetables. We're really trying to, I guess, with understanding the motivations for why people do the things that they do, we can use these ideas as maybe like health professionals, as a dietitian or as a doctor, to guide our patients to hopefully develop more of these autonomous motivations.
Exactly. And so we really need to cultivate this more autonomous relationship with our eating and our reasons for good nutrition. What are some ways that you've seen people cultivate that?
It's really thinking about the reasons why we're doing something. So trying to think about the reasons why you yourself want to make the change rather than why does somebody else want you to make the change. If we're trying to make healthy eating changes, it might be thinking about the benefits that it's going to bring yourself. For example, Sarah mentions the body food choice congruence, recognizing that you can eat foods that are going to taste good, but there's certain foods that are going to make your body feel good and function at its best. So fiber, for example, recognizing that if I was to eat more fiber from, say, fruits and vegetables and grains, that's going to make my gut function and feel better, and it's going to make me feel better. It's not going to make anybody else feel better. It's going to make myself feel better.
That's right.
Likewise, thinking about if I eat a particular way, if I'm listening to my hunger and satiety cues, so I'm making sure that my body gets enough fuel rather than maybe trying to go hungry to lose weight or whatever. Making sure that I get enough fuel that's going to mean that I can engage in the activities that bring me lots of joy throughout the day.
Right.
And that might be important for myself.
Exactly. All those are awesome points. Recently, I did an episode on midlife body image, which was really enlightening for me. Could you talk just a little bit about how body image and body appreciation might interact with this?
I didn't go through all the principles of intuitive eating earlier, but one of the principles is respect your body. And the way that we brought that into the intervention that was researched was by helping people in midlife pause to think about appreciating how their body functions rather than what it looks like. For me, even in my worst days, when my chronic fatigue was at its worst and I was stuck in bed, still finding ways to appreciate. Maybe for me at the time, it wasn't appreciating because I had a lot of limitations, but being in awe of how my brain was functioning to still keep me alive, or like noticing my lungs, the way my lungs felt when I breathed had changed after I had this virus. And I focused on breathing exercises. And over time, my lungs were able to take in more oxygen and I was starting to feel better. So appreciating what my body was doing and how it has carried a baby and fed a baby for 17
Yes.
months and appreciating my body when I've done from 5Ks to marathons, regardless of what I looked like, because no one was out there on the race course saying, oh, you're not a size 6, you can't be here. How did we do that with body appreciation? We kind of did like body scan kind of activities, like taking time to scan our body and think about, can I appreciate my lungs and my liver, these things that we don't really think about, and my butt for giving me something cushy to sit on. And then also taking an opportunity to think about ways that we could describe our body other than thin and fat. Is my body agile? Is my body robust? Is my body curvy? Things like that. And interestingly, if I could put a quick New Zealand spin on this and an indigenous spin on this, we had Ashley Gillen visit our university to guest lecture on what is fatness from an indigenous point of view. And she was saying, actually, from a Maori point of view, that means a body is fertile and plentiful. And there were really positive connotations. It's just when you start looking at a Western lens of bodies, it's where you pathologize them and look for the things that are wrong with that. A lot of us have grown up in a culture that thinks in this dichotomous way, either a body is good or it's bad or it's healthy or it's unhealthy. So allowing a bit more of that kind of wiggle room. How we think
that is well said, and for me too, it's something that's come up recently is like just this being aware of this socialization of the conventional beauty, just we have been socialized with what beauty is, but there's just so many different interpretations, and to be aware that that's just kind of, I'll just say a lie and unrealistic. It's just not helpful what we're fed in media in terms of what is conventional beauty.
Yeah, and with social media has been cursed for how it's an easy way to keep pushing the thin ideal. But I use social media in the opposite way. I follow people on Instagram who are in larger bodies. And by me seeing those larger bodies doing whatever they're doing, they could just be sitting, they could be on a hike through the Grand Canyon. That's helping me normalize that bodies do come in different shapes and sizes and different abilities, and that's okay.
I mean, that is one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is to change the narrative, to really say we need to change how people think about this. We're midlifers. We know better. We're smarter than this. We don't have to swallow what we're fed. We can be critical thinkers, and we can talk about this in a healthier way and be advocates for healthier ideas, for example, when it comes to body image and eating.
And what we haven't talked about yet really too much has been around mental health. And with the research that I did for a few years ago, we looked at teaching women to eat intuitively, but also using acceptance and commitment therapy skills. We saw improvements in mental health. And we have lots of data to suggest that there's an association between dieting and poor mental health outcomes. And internationally, mental health is a big issue. There are not enough psychologists or not enough social workers to treat everyone who seeks treatment. And we know that most people who are experiencing mental health difficulties are unlikely to get mental health support.
Right.
If we have intuitive eating as a tool that somebody could try, not just for physical health, but also that mental health component or a spiritual health component, I think add that to your repertoire, add that to your toolkit.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you incorporated ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, with that.
Yeah, for people unfamiliar with acceptance and commitment therapy, the model that underlies what you do individually, one-on-one, or when you're developing an intervention, there's these 6 components of the model where you're looking at contact with the present moment, which would be like mindfulness. In diffusion, we think of as being able to unhook from unhelpful thoughts There's this values component, committed action component, selfless context component. I'm missing something right now, but actually the way that I think of acceptance and commitment therapy is from the DNAV model point of view.
Okay.
And so for people unfamiliar with that model, it's been developed by Louise Hayes and Joseph Cherokee to be developmentally appropriate for adolescents. But when I learned about this model, I thought this is really simple and also relevant to adults, where you can think of yourself as someone who is a noticer, noticing the things happening within you and around you. You have an advisor, which is this part of you that can take your experiences from the past and give you advice about what you should do in this moment, but also thinks ahead about what could happen in the future and how does that inform the choices that you make right now. Like I said, you have that noticer, you have the advisor, and then we have an explorer. The explorer part of us is thinking about our values, what's important to us, and trying new ways of being, trying new behaviors, trying new actions, trying new things that are in line with who we want to be, how we want our life to be. And then just being open to seeing what happens, like experimenting. And if the thing that you tried works for you, cool. You might use it again in the future. If it didn't work, that's okay too. You now know that approach didn't work for you, so you won't use it in the future. Or maybe it just didn't work in this particular situation.
Very cool.
So,
very cool.
Yeah, thinking about acceptance and commitment therapy, we help people think about their values. Hannah talked about values when she was talking about self-determination theory. With people that I've worked with in midlife, it's what's important to me. People will talk about domains of their life, like my health is important to me, my family is important to me. So then we drill down and say, well, why are those things important to me? People want to be around for their children, for their grandchildren. There's a lot about wanting to feel independent and not feeling like we have to rely on other people. So we link these values to why would you eat intuitively and how can you use acceptance and commitment therapy processes to support that. From an ACT point of view, I mentioned diffusion. I like to think of it as the more simple way of thinking about it as unhooking. And we might have a thought that we're all caught up in, like, oh, I'm lazy. You might be somebody who wants to eat their fruits and vegetables or add the legumes and lentils to a meal, whatever, but you think, oh, I'm too lazy. You get really caught up and fused with I'm too lazy. To unhook from that, we can say, I'm having the thought that I am lazy. You still acknowledge that this is coming up for you, but by saying I'm having the thought that I'm lazy, it takes some of the control away from the thought and creates this space for you to then respond in a way that is meaningful to you. And the other diffusion technique that I recommend to people is saying things in a silly voice, whether that's Donald Duck or Donald Trump, or I think of the band Journey when they sing Living on a Prayer, and my unhelpful thoughts, like I'm lazy, I would sing it in the way that Journey would have sung it when they were singing Living on a Prayer. And Kyle, the reaction that you have right now is exactly the reaction that you would be looking for. You're taking something that has a bit of a sting to it and not trying to make fun of it, but trying to take some of the power away from the thought so that you can react or respond or do what's meaningful to you. That's why I thought I would mention about those would be around the values, thinking about our values, diffusing. There's also urge surfing. I don't know if you've talked about that on your podcast before.
I have not. Please enlighten us.
We talked a little bit about hunger and being able to notice hunger and respond to hunger. And even me, after 15 years of practicing intuitive eating, sometimes it's just like, oh, is that physical hunger, or is that my mouth just wanting something in it, or my hands wanting something to do? And so somebody might practice urge surfing, where you pause, you take a breath to just get into this moment and Notice where in your body are you having the urge? Is it a thought? For me, sometimes it's just a thought that I'm having the urge to eat. Especially for me, it happens at 9:00 at night where like I'm having the urge to eat. And so then I surf the urge and I give myself time to see if that feeling I need to eat grows inside of my body. And if I give myself maybe 10 minutes to see if that urge is a physical sensation that does say like, feed me now, I am hungry, then that's what I'll do. Then I'll eat. Or maybe the urge, it rises like a wave and then it crashes and it disappears. It becomes part of the ocean again. And the feeling, the urge to eat is gone. Allowing ourselves to surf the urge to see what happens can be really important. Well, not really important, but really useful. The last, I don't want to call it a trick or a tip. The last thing that we can use in acceptance and commitment therapy context, I call it just-in-time intervention, and it's called the choice point. And so we're in a situation where we can make a choice and we can choose to act in a way that's in line with the person that we want to be, the life that we want to live, or we might choose to act in a way that moves us away from the person that we want to be and away from the life that we want to live. So an intuitive eater might value living according to the body's wisdom. And they might have a moment where they're going out for coffee with a friend and they see their friend ordering a muffin or a slice of cake to go with their coffee. Should I order some too? Because that's just a social norm. Sometimes you see somebody else ordering food, but you listen to your body and you're like not actually physically hungry. What do you do in that moment? Do you not order the cake or the muffin because that's the person that you want to be? Or do you order it and eat it, but you're not actually enjoying it because you felt like you had to?
Yeah.
So using that choice point to help you decide, do you order it or do you not order it?
That is great. That sounds like being authentic with your eating. You know, who do you want to be? Are you making decisions for yourself based on your own values and your own priorities? I love this conversation. For me, the times I'm most at risk are when I'm stressed or I'm tired. Do you have any response to that as it relates to being an intuitive eater?
Yes. Evelyn Triboli and Elise Resch, the authors of the Intuitive Eating book, also have a really helpful workbook. And within that workbook, there's a section devoted to Nutrition 911. And what do you do in those moments when you're stressed or when you're sick or when you're depressed or for whatever reason, your life demands are high. Your motivation might be different than usual. And what do you do? And it's a little bit of preparation to know what would work for you in those moments. Based on your past experience, what would you need to have available to you in the cupboard, in the fridge, in the freezer, in your bag? For me, it's usually like when I'm on the go is when I need that Nutrition 911 and figuring out what will be low burden and satisfying that I can have available to me and not having shame or guilt around what that looks like. Like I mentioned with my chronic fatigue when it was bad, the scrambled eggs work for me. I know it's nutritious with the protein in there. I'm satisfied for a decent length of time where I'm not going to be putting energy into eating again really soon. Or the bowl of cereal and the milk. I know it's got a mixture of different vitamins and minerals and the fiber that's going to nourish my body in those moments. What are the situations where it's most difficult for you to make those eating choices that are in line with the person you want to be, the life that you want to live, and just taking the 5 minutes to mentally prepare for that and then going a step further and preparing for that. So buying the pretzels, buying, I don't know, whatever it is to make things work.
That is spot on, practical, useful, And that really works for me. That's exactly what I was asking. Can you hear that? Wow. Okay. So you've given us a lot of practical tips here so far. Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know?
Last tip that is based on research that we've done, and it has been as simple as rating your hunger, rating your fullness, and rating your mindfulness. Before you eat, rating your hunger. And it could be on a scale from 0, where you're either not hungry at all, to 10, where you're completely stuffed. Or in our research, a 0 was your hunger is so extreme that you're almost sick from how hungry you are. And then that other end of the scale is you're so sick from eating so much. So where are you falling in that moment? And then starting to eat when that rating is at a level that's just kind of like a little tap on the shoulder saying, hey, I'm hungry. Or when it's that tap on the shoulder where like, okay, I'm satisfied. I've had enough, and I'm not going to leave this snack or this meal feeling like I'm depriving myself. And then the mindfulness. So you can rate that on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 would be absolutely not mindful at all. It is the distracted eating at the desk, the sandwiches by the side. You're typing with one hand, eating with the other, or when we're driving, trying to eat whatever it is with one hand and drive with the other hand. Whereas the other end of the scale would be absolutely 100% mindful and noticing every single bite of the whole meal, noticing taste, texture, temperature, how it's feeling in the body. I find that a lot of people find that really impractical, especially when we're in social situations. A lot of us are eating meals with coworkers or with family or with a partner or whoever else. And it's just impractical to be in your own zone when you have other people around you, and giving yourself permission to say, it's okay that I just check in every once in a while during this meal to notice, am I still enjoying what I'm eating? And so that sort of mindfulness might be rated maybe somewhere between a 5 and a 7 on a scale from 0 to 10. And that's okay, because a little bit of mindfulness might feel better than none at all.
Those are really great practical steps and a helpful mindset we can adopt right away here and continue to practice. And again, I love how you're talking about this in terms of it's small steps. It's doing it continually, making it more habitual, making it more autonomous, as you were talking about, Hannah. Really feel like it's becoming a part of us and part of our values. And again, I love it, eating for your authentic self. And this has just been a really incredible, enlightening and helpful conversation. It just really is. Before we come to a close, it just seems to me like there are going to be many people seeking further resources on this. What would you recommend for resources that people could access if they want to go deeper with this topic?
The intuitive eating book that I mentioned right at the very start, I think that was quite a solid foundation for me. And as Sarah mentioned as well, the intuitive eating workbook is also a really good resource, because it's got those, that space where you can write down your own experiences and reflect on it and really work through it as a process.
Perfect. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of resources?
Yep. I've found Evelyn Triboli's Instagram account and YouTube channel really valuable. She has done really short 1 minute or less videos on what is intuitive eating. And something else that I've valued about Evelyn's Instagram account and YouTube channel, especially during the pandemic, is she does a nice job of saying it's okay to be flexible in how you fit intuitive eating in your life, especially around the stigma that can happen with people who use canned foods and frozen food to feed themselves. There's a bit of stigma that if you eat those things, that's bad. And there's a lot of fresh is best messaging out there. But Evelyn helps us feel okay about the frozen vegetables and the frozen fruit in our freezer are just as nutritious as the fresh stuff that you're paying twice as much for in wintertime. So that has been one of the criticisms of intuitive eating that I think is important to acknowledge is that it could be criticized for being only for people who are privileged, particularly financially, but also people who are in more socially acceptable bodies in whatever way. I did want to acknowledge that I'm aware of the privilege that someone needs to have to make this more accessible to them. Fed is best. And if all you have is the 2-minute noodles this week, then that is okay.
Right. Sara and Hannah, again, I just really appreciate how you approach this topic. It's very real. It's very thoughtful. It's very rooted in science. And so I'm extremely grateful for this time. It's been extremely enjoyable. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And at 1 hour, I'll stop. I hope that was okay with you all. But oh my gosh, that was so good. Thank you. I'm so happy you made it to the end of this conversation with Sara and Hannah, and I hope you found as much value in their insights as I have. I also hope you'll be kind to yourself this week and continue to find those incremental steps that will take you where you want to be in your journey. Thank you so much for listening today. It really gives me great joy that you made it this far into the episode. So until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and stay true to yourself. Hey there, listeners. I just wanted to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for listening to this podcast. Your support and feedback keep me motivated to continue growing and crafting episodes that are meaningful and helpful for you on your journey. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Gen X Mindscape community page on Facebook. It's a great space to share your feedback on the show, suggest future episode topics, or simply connect with fellow listeners. Also, don't hesitate to leave me a voice message over at genxmindscape.com by clicking on Leave a Voice Message at the top of the page. Whether you choose to remain anonymous or provide your name and email, it's entirely up to you. Once again, thanks so much for listening. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you.